Hello, and welcome to the Three Questions podcast, where we dive deep into the world of wealth management and connect you with industry experts. I'm Maria Angelica Alvarado, founder and CEO of Luminary Catalyst. We specialize in crafting data-driven growth strategies and partnerships to help businesses and leaders thrive. I am your guest host for this second part in this three-part series on wealth management. If you or someone close to you is asking, how are we going to afford our retirement? Stay tuned. Our topic, the three questions cross-border investors should ask about retirement income planning. Thank you for taking the time to check out the podcast. And if you enjoy this episode of Three Questions, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the podcast and YouTube channel. Today, we're continuing to flip the script. I'm stepping in as guest host, and the guest is Wayne Baxter, the usual host of this podcast and senior executive manager at One Capital Management. Wayne has decades of experience helping high net worth cross-border clients navigate complex wealth strategies, including tailored retirement income plans that bridge both the US and Canadian systems. Who better to address today's topic, the three questions cross-border investors should ask about retirement income planning. Wayne, it's wonderful to have you back on this side of the mic. Thank you for letting me play host again.
Well, I'm really glad you made it here, and Maria Angelica, this has been a great experience for me to be able to, I don't know why I got this idea. I know, I can tell you actually where this whole idea came from. This goes back to my radio show days, and the folks at AM 740 in Toronto said, you know, Wayne, you'll know you've made it when you're a guest on your own radio show.
Yeah.
It never happened.
And it is an honor that you asked me to do this. And I was like, I've never interviewed anybody, but I've had a lot of great conversations. And this is just another conversation that just happens to be videotaped.
Yeah, well, it's all good. Looking forward to it. And I realize that where were you on the day of sort of thing here. So I'm ready for all the questions. And so...
Well, I will say that your podcast is so heavily sought out within the business community. There are so many subject matter experts that are, I think you're fully docked, like in taping for the rest of the year. I think you've got them all lined up.
Well, I got a bit ahead of schedule here. I will say that's one thing. I didn't mention that the last time we were on, is that, when we first started, the whole idea of the podcast was obviously to create interesting information and content to share with my clients. And I would say it was probably around episode 22, 23, 24 in there where I finally had an epiphany and went, we're creating content here for my friends that they're using as well for their own benefit. So I would say that the benefit of the podcast now is almost as much as benefit, not just for my clients' education and helping them and giving them information, but also to share with my friends all over the United States and Canada. They're using this content to help educate their clients, their colleagues, and it's been great. I must admit.
But it's not even just the clients and the friends, but the entire population. You are now on YouTube. You have the podcast. You get searched on Spotify.
We're on LinkedIn.
You're on LinkedIn. So there's so many ways to access valuable information and these subject matter experts, which are really tough to find. But you've curated a great collection.
Well, thank you.
So Wayne, before we get started with the three questions, let's provide some backdrop on why retirement planning is so essential for cross-border families.
Well, if you think about, we're going to deal with more, high net worth families that are splitting, assets between the United States and Canada. And, they're looking to create a reliable income stream in retirement. And it isn't just about savings. Most people think it would be, but there's something else. You're navigating two distinct systems that you need to sort of manage to avoid gaps, taxes, unexpected shortfalls. You have, the pension systems. You have to harmonize the U.S. and Canadian pension systems, retirement pensions. The United States, Social Security. It can create a bit of a foundation, but if you're a cross-border family, you have to take into consideration how to coordinate benefits with the Canada Pension Plan. We call it the CPP in Canada.
Right.
And you have something called Old Age Security, which we call OAS in Canada. And you have to coordinate those so you maximize payout and reduce clawbacks. And I bring up the clawbacks part because in Canada, the Old Age Security pension is actually can get clawed back if your income is too high. So there's some management
So
of
pardon
income.
my ignorance. What does clawback mean?
That means that when there's an audit done of your income, and if your income is too high, Canada Revenue Agency will actually claw back, basically tax your pension benefit.
Interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
On top of that, there is this conversion of retirement saving vehicles. So in Canada, we save money for retirement through something called Registered Retirement Savings Plans, RRSPs. And
Another acronym.
Yeah, well, I knew you were going to get, yes. There'll be more.
I bet.
So there's Registered Retirement Savings Plans is what Canadians have historically, typically used in a similar way in the United States. You use an IRA or 401k, tax deferred savings. So in Canada, when the year you turn 71, that year you have to convert. It's an administrative process. You have to convert your RRSP to a registered retirement income fund. You don't have to change the investments per se, but this paperwork process of DocuSign now, I would hope by everybody, where you have to basically acknowledge to the government of Canada that I now have turned my savings plan into an income fund. And again, you have to sort of manage that, and there's mandatory withdrawals, just like there is RMDs required minimum distributions, when you do that. And you have to deal with it. Some clients keep their money in a 401k. Well, they have to roll those to IRAs, an example. So those are just some examples of income planning. But I'd like to chime in on a couple more before we go to the next question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay. So way back when, I remember with the years, year 2003.
Okay.
I got onto this thing where every client I would meet, or new prospective client I would meet, I would ask them, what is their most valuable financial asset? Almost every person I met with gave me the same answer. They told me their most valuable financial asset was their house.
And it's funny because you mentioned that in our last episode, how Canada has different rules for capital gains in homes.
Right.
That explains why that would be their main
They
huge
would think
asset.
that, but here's the thing. I'm gonna let you in a little secret. That year, of all the people I met, and I met quite a few, by the way, only one person was accurate, mathematically correct, to state that their house was the most valuable financial asset. For most North Americans, and I'm going to put you in the same category, the most valuable financial asset is their ability to make money.
Interesting. That makes sense.
Okay. So you can't, when you're looking at income, you cannot overlook the importance of a long-term disability insurance policy.
Agreed.
Either through a group plan or individualized you purchase on your own. So that's one. Life insurance can help provide tax-efficient income for the people that you love, right? And for yourselves, if you're using permanent life insurance.
Correct.
Right? Long-term care, we talked about earlier, the biggest risk. I mean, we did this on the other previous podcast about longevity risk, right? Well, long-term care insurance can provide funding for what can be very costly long-term care expenses. So those are just some examples of income planning. It isn't just about accumulating money into a stock and bond portfolio.
And I'm going to jump in here because something you said really resonated with me. Long-term disability insurance is so important because right now I'm in my income generating era.
Highest income earning years.
So I should
we won't
really
say for how many,
that.
but yes.
Right, of course. I do have life insurance because I understand that that would help my loved ones take care of some final expenses and things like that. And long-term care insurance actually became something important to me when my friend's father ended up having to go to a memory care facility. And it was for a really long time. And it was the long-term care insurance that actually helped them subsidize that care. And you don't know how long you're going to be alive under those conditions. So that could really drain money.
My Aunt Arlene, may she rest in peace. I loved her. She got diagnosed with dementia, Alzheimer's, when she was 66, and she lived for 13 years.
Yeah.
It was
not
tough times.
So for my analytical view, because you know that my mind works in data-driven strategies.
Another data nerd like me.
I am. Can you share with me the tools you use to help cross-border families plan for a sustainable retirement?
Okay, so we talked again about this the last episode. I think I mentioned in the last episode that we're going to be some recurring themes here. So hopefully not be redundantly redundant. But I will say that one of the things that I've been utilizing in this role that I've had, going back to the early 2000s, of basically putting together an investment strategy for clients. They come to you, say they have all this money, they want to invest it. What should they do? Well, the basic process begins with understanding people's cash flow. So the process I've used, and believe it or not, I've used the same expense and income planner spreadsheet. You know all about it. Yes. See?
Challenging spreadsheet.
Yeah. So there's another person I want to give a tip of the hat to, a guy back in Canada, Mike Hoberlin. Mike, if you happen to be watching or listening to us, tip of the hat to you. Mike Hoberlin, back in 2000, 2001, gave me the template for the expense and income planner that I use to this day. Mike was in the insurance business. I knew him when I was back at IPC in Canada. So Mike, I've been using that same spreadsheet, believe it or not, all these years. So expense and income planner. So we start with, what do you spend money on? So that's,
and you do it in today's dollars.
Yes.
Because you'll handle inflation.
That's the part we can deal with afterwards.
Right.
But so we start with understanding how people spend money, not just this week, not this month, but like next year, 3, 5, 7, 10, 15 years out. We'll try to do an estimate in today's dollars of what you're going to spend money on, because it will change as time passes, right?
Right.
Then we take that information amongst all the other goals and objective, and we create something called a capital forecast. And that capital forecast, typically, Mariangelica, will go out 20, maybe 30 years. 20 years is pretty typical, whether you're in the, your accumulators. Are usually three phases of wealth. There's the accumulation, pre-retired, and financially independent, right? So if you're an accumulator, it's just as important to see how you're going to accumulate wealth. So
right.
we create a capital forecast so that when we do our review, which you mentioned the last time,
right?
What do we review? Do we just review an investment statement? Well, that would be kind of pointless, because what are you reviewing it against, right? So you have, this is what you've accumulated so far, and what does the capital forecast? Are we on track? Are we doing okay?
Are you saving at the pace that you thought that you were going to be able to? When you audit your client's wealth management strategy, where do you usually start and why?
Okay. Where we usually start is with a capital forecast. And where it really starts with is understanding where my clients spend money.
Right.
Okay, so how do I figure that out? Well, we have a document that I've been using since the early 2000s. It's an expense and income planner. It's a spreadsheet setup that I work with my clients
Excel is
on.
your friend.
Yes, exactly right. And I want to give a tip of the hat to my friend Mike Hoberlin back in Toronto, who introduced me to this document way back, I guess it was 2001, 2002, that he gave us. And I've been using it ever since. So Mike, thank you very much for that. So what we do is we'll get a really clear understanding of how they spend money first. Then once we have that information and we understand, all their goals, what they're hoping to achieve, all the things, and we'll use this expense and income planner, and you'll love this, multiple tabs. It could be, we could have 3 different or 4 different eras of spending within the next 20 years. So we'll do like a 20, maybe 30-year capital forecast that shows income, taxes paid, expenses.
And that's in today's dollars.
Yes. Well, the calculation that we use is, but then we will forecast it out over 20 years, taking into consideration, the appreciation of money. Typically, we'll use a long-term assumption for inflation. And so we'll do a 20-year capital forecast, let's say. And so when we do a client review, we'll not just have, how has your investments done over the last little while, but we'll be able to compare it to the capital forecast that we've created.
Okay, so I remember you asking me this similar question when I was a guest earlier in your show, which thank you again for inviting me. And this was the question you gave me. In your experience, what's often the problem when working with a new client? Their existing strategy or their execution of their strategy? And I know what I answered you, but what is your perspective on that question?
Okay, so we're dealing with, I'm going to use the example of somebody who's coming to me, who has been referred to me by one of my friends and colleagues here, either here in the United States or in Canada. And usually, quite frankly, Mariangelica, the problem is they have no strategy. Okay.
So there's nothing to implement.
There is, they've been
they've been good at accumulating.
They're an accumulator.
But it's the execution part.
Right. It was just like that case we talked about last podcast where you were asking about a success story. This particular couple were incredibly good at accumulating wealth, but it was just like they had money in
different pots,
many different accounts, but there was no cohesive plan whatsoever. So that's fairly common. Good at accumulating, but they weren't able to
see past that.
Right.
They're just stuck in that one. You said there's 3 levels, and they're in that one, and they were just kind of like in a hamster wheel.
They're in what I would call the pre-retired phase. So I mentioned earlier, there's accumulator, pre-retired, financial independence. So the case we were talking about last show, I'd say they were pre-retired.
Got it.
I'm working with a couple right now. Was just introduced to me a couple this week. They're Canadians living in upstate New York, and they're wondering if they can move back to Canada. They're kind of like, they lived in the U.S. for 30 years, and I'm wondering, can I move back to Canada? And
but that's common. I know people that have moved back to their home countries.
It's not unusual.
In retirement. It's not. Okay. Yeah. Wayne, now let's get to the nitty gritty.
Okay, we're going into the questions now?
Let's do the 3 questions cross-border investors should ask about retirement income planning. Let's start with question number 1. My employer is relocating me from the Greater Toronto Area.
GTA, by the way, we call it.
Yeah, I think GTA, I think Grand Theft Auto, but that's just me. To Austin, Texas. Can I make contributions to my registered retirement savings plan? I'm not trying the acronym, so I'm going to say all of it.
AKA RRSP for my friends in Canada. So the question is, can I continue contributing to my RSP once I move to the U.S.? And so the money can stay invested and can grow. It's very common. Like, I still have my RSP account in Canada. Now, just as an aside, one of the things I did with my RSP long ago was I converted my RSP to Canadian dollars when the foreign exchange was favorable. Mm-hmm. So my RSP is now a U.S. dollar investment account, even though it's Canadian. It's custodied in Canada, but it's in U.S. dollars, U.S. security. So the money can still grow, and it will be tax deferred. Oh, mind you, California may treat it slightly differently, where they have their own income tax rules. But the contributions made after you become a U.S. resident are generally not deductible. So it doesn't make sense to continue to make RSP contributions after you've moved to the United States. There are better options. I'll give you 4.
Well, wait, I have a question to follow up. Have you seen the reverse, where a U.S. citizen has moved to Canada and wants to contribute?
We're going to get to that in a minute. So yes, the answer is yes. So
interesting.
Yeah. So there are options, though. If you're a Canadian moving to the United States and you want to save money into a retirement plan, I'll give you 4 basic options. 1, if you're being hired by an employer, the 401k plan that the employer offers would be a better option than RSP.
Okay.
Which in this case, and I do actually have a client that moved from the Greater Toronto Area to Austin, and that's exactly what they did, is they're saving into their company 401k. There's another option. It could be an IRA, and there's variations of the IRA savings. There's another a retirement saving account called a Roth IRA. Now, Roth is after-tax savings. That's tax sheltered. It's similar to a tax-free savings account in Canada. Doesn't quite have the same flexibility. And then obviously you can just save money into a brokerage account, like into a taxable account as well. So again, depending on the fact pattern of the family, those are all options.
So now let's go back to the other thought that came to mind, which is the U.S. citizen relocating to Canada. Are they able to still contribute to their 401k?
This is interesting. And I actually do have a case of a client who is currently in that situation. They were working for a U.S.-based company. They moved to Canada, and they are continuing working with that employer. So for a 401k contribution for a Canadian resident, remember talking about resident here, U.S. citizen living in Canada, the laws allow for them to continue contributing to the 401k even though they're living in Canada, because it's the employment status and plan participation rules that allow it. So it's U.S. compensation. It's not dependent on residency. Canada allows a deduction for contributions for U.S. Employer pension plans, and these are the criteria. The employee was contributing before they became a Canadian resident, or the plan was tied to employment, which obviously was just the case with this particular client.
I love that. And there's so many details that can be a tripwire for anyone navigating these waters. That's why I'm so glad we're doing this episode, because you're showing the amount of depth that you know when it comes to these intricacies. Okay.
Well, experience is a big help.
Yes, that's very true. But you're but you're walked these shoes and you're from Canada and you've come to the US and you've kept your clients up in Canada. So that's what makes this such a valuable episode. I say 3-part series. So let's do our topic is 3 questions cross-border investors should ask about retirement income planning. I'm Maria Angelica Alvarado, founder and CEO of Luminary Catalyst. We specialize in crafting data-driven growth strategies and partnerships to help businesses and leaders thrive. I am your guest host for this special series on wealth management. Our guest this week is none other than the esteemed Wayne Baxter, Senior Executive Manager at One Capital Management. Okay, let's get back to the questions. Question number 2. I turned 65 this month. I am now eligible for Social Security. If I start now receiving my benefits, it's $2,200 a month. If I wait until I'm 67, it will be $2,600 a month. But if I wait till I'm 70 to get the income, it'll be $3,200 a month. Based on my expected future tax obligations, which option would you recommend?
Well, first things first, this is actually derived from a client of mine who had emailed me not that long ago. We changed it up a little bit, but this is directly from a One Capital Wayne Baxter client. And I will say this, every case is like this, like when it comes to financial planning, capital forecasting, all that, it's like DNA. Everybody has their own situation. You cannot for people like yourself, it's basically you have to do this for each individual person. So that's the first thing. But I will say this, in most cases, if cash flow isn't needed, so that's a key part, cash flow is not needed, health is good, delaying to age 70 creates the strongest long-term income floor. And I would say also the most planning flexibility. But remember, the right answer depends on things like your tax situation, not just the amount of payment. There's a tax consideration. And again, if there's a cash flow need now, well, you're probably going to take the money, right? If you're temporarily in a lower tax bracket and perhaps before your required minimum distributions start, in other words, you don't have to take a distribution, that window may be ideal for drawing down your IRAs and delaying Social Security. So again, the key thing here is that these things have to be sort of analyzed and planned for, and there's no pat answer. But yeah, typically, if you're not in need of the capital, you're in good health, you don't have a longevity, you don't have a shorter term longevity expectation, probably delaying your Social Security payment until age 70 would be a good idea.
So now let's add another variation to the question. How does this affect someone who's a cross-border client regarding their strategy for taking Social Security?
Well, if you're a Canadian living in the U.S., or I guess you could say an American citizen living in Canada, and you have contributed both U.S. and Canadian pension plans, and you have to see how Social Security interacts with the Canada Pension Plan, the old age security system, and also having to take your mandatory withdrawals from your registered retirement income fund and your U.S. required minimum distributions or RMDs from your IRA. So there is, you have to take it. And now one good thing though, and thanks to the current administration here in the U.S., give them credit for something that people will be happy about, is they got rid of the windfall elimination provision. I bet you've never heard of that.
I did not.
Okay, so for Canadians, this is not just for Canadians, but since we work with Canadians, if you were living in the United States for a year, contributing to Social Security,
right,
but you're also in the past had contributed to the Canada Pension Plan, you're eligible for old age security. In the past, Social Security would look at that income that you were earning from the Canadian pension, and they would claw back a portion of your Social Security. That went away when the new administration came in.
I didn't know the U.S. had that clawback feature.
Windfall elimination of the WEP we used to call it, but that I guess I was under President Trump decided that was no longer a thing. And I remember a bunch of my clients got checks.
Wow!
Because they got basically rebated for the money that had been held back, and I got multiple emails and phone calls from clients saying, "I got this check from the U.S. government. Is this safe to cash it? Are you going to take that money back?
Is this real?
Is it?" No, they were not. They were afraid that this was like kind of, they're going to take this. They're going to let me keep this, are they? No, this is for real. And they said, oh, by the way, our Social Security payment has gone up as well. So
interesting.
Yeah. So we used to plan for that in our capital forecast when I did for our clients, but that basically is no longer a thing.
Okay.
For now.
Let's go on to question number 3.
All right.
From the perspective of a Canadian resident with a U.S. IRA, how can I, or that prospective resident, efficiently convert my, hold on to your alphabet soup, RRSP to a RRIF, I'm not going into that, while managing cross-border tax implications on IRA withdrawals?
I love that. That was very good.
The alphabet soup side, yes.
Mary Angelica, your Americanism definitely came out there. My friends in Canada, they're going, oh.
Don't make me say what the initials stand for, but I will take the compliment.
Okay. So registered retirement savings plan to a registered retirement income fund. So here's basically the way it works. You have to convert your RSP to an RRIF at age 71. And again, that's a Canadian thing. It's a requirement. You have a minimum withdrawal that you have to take the following year. So in age 71, like typically the second half of the year, you have to do this RSP conversion. Well, most of our clients, we actually have a list. Okay, this number of clients, these clients are turning 71. So usually in September, October, my client services associate, Hayden, how you doing, buddy? Another fellow Canadian, by the way. He will contact my clients and say, okay, you have to convert your RSP to a RIF this year. So we usually do it in the fall. The following year, they have to start taking their minimum withdrawals. So how can you sort of manage this? Well, the good news is that in the U.S., and this is thanks to the Secure Act 2.0, you can now delay your U.S. requirement, your RMDs, until age 73. So that gives a 1-year buffer between taking your Canadian retirement money, your minimum distribution from Canada, to the U.S. That gives you a valuable 1-year buffer for some cross-border planning, and allows Canadian residents to strategically time their withdrawals.
Wow.
Now, again, like I said, you have until age 73 to start RMDs. That has a planning window, which can be incredibly voluntary, beneficiary for the client. You can maybe voluntarily take some RMDs. You could even look at doing a Roth conversion, and if you're in a lower tax bracket, there's a bunch of things that you can plan for.
Okay, so before we wrap up this episode, how might this RMD delay influence the role of long-term care insurance in protecting retirement income for cross-border clients?
Well, that extra time that you have before you have to take the U.S. RMDA again until age 73, and by the way, it is going to get even longer in the future. Eventually, you're not going to have to start taking RMDs here in the U.S. until age 75.
Really? Well, that's a fantastic piece of information.
Here's a little behind the curtain information. So whenever my better half asked me when I'm going to retire, I used to always say, well, 10 more years. And then when they came out with this law regarding the age 75, they said, well, when I have to start taking RMDs, I'll start thinking about retirement. So for all my clients wondering how much longer I plan on sticking around here, we got a ways to go yet. So again, the extra time can be really beneficial because it gives you time to, what I'll say, build a protective buffer, and you can use that delay to fund the premiums for a long-term, for a long-term care policy, for example. You're not being forced to take money out, and that it can be a tax planning and a cash flow planning strategy, basically to pay for insurance premiums because you haven't had to take money out, pay taxes on it. So there's some strategizing you can do.
It's very good to know that you'll be able to push that RMD till age 75.
Yeah, eventually. Not here yet, but it's coming down
eventually.
the road.
But I'm thinking for me. That's what I'm thinking for me. Yeah. Okay. For those watching our website, we're including your information on the screen. For those who are listening, what is the best way for someone to contact you?
Well, I know when we say here at the end of the podcast, if you want to schedule a meeting with me, you just go on the website at www.onecapital.com/meet with Wayne. That's one way. You can also email me at wbaxter@onecapital.com, or Mary Angelica's favorite way, which is
pick up the phone and call.
Yeah, 805-719-4211. I guess those would be the best way. I mean, there's another, for those who are on LinkedIn, you can always message me on LinkedIn as well. I'm on there. You can find a lot of the podcast content on LinkedIn, by the way, in addition to the One Capital website. So yeah, lots of ways to find me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Wayne.
This
has been such an informative series, and thank you for letting me play host.
Yeah, you were great. A lot of fun. And we got one more to go.
We have one more to go.
All right, away we go.
Stay tuned.
I look forward to bringing you the Three Questions podcast, and I hope you find them educational and informative. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to our podcast and YouTube channels. And to receive a notification when our latest episode has been posted, please click on the notifications bell. Lastly, to schedule an online Zoom consultation with me to discuss your wealth management needs, please click on the link in the description box below, www.onecapital.com/meet with Wayne. Thank you, and we will see you soon.